Enjoy all your favorite sports like never before at BetMGM. Sign up using code Hawkeye and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. When you register with BetMGM, you'll get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, and the best daily promotions in the business. And with BetMGM at your fingertips, every play and every game matters more than ever. Remember to use code Hawkeye and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Place your money line, prop, or parlay bets with the king of sportsbooks today. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. Iowa only. New customer offer. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.
At Parker, our purpose is simple. We want to make the world a better place by working more efficiently, by using more sustainable practices, by developing better technologies. We keep moving forward. With each new idea, innovation, and partnership, we're one step closer to fulfilling our purpose every single day. To find out more, visit parker.com/purpose. Parker, engineering your success.
Hashtag no music, no intro. Another episode of Hashtag Saints Twitter podcast coming at y'all. This episode is a very important one that Ryan and I have wanted to do for a while. I'm a little upset we weren't able to record this in the month of May, which was the month for mental health awareness. But joining us on the podcast, we have, I don't know if I should say Mrs. or but we have CHEVONDA Allen, who is a licensed MFT. I was going through your website to kind of just see your journey and see, how your career shifted for you now working in the mental health field. Thank you so much for joining us. We want to have this episode. Obviously, a lot of our listeners are African Americans, and even if you're not African American, I think you can take a lot from this episode, talking about mental health awareness and, in general, mental health awareness in the Black community. But before we even get into that, let's talk about first. You could introduce yourself to the listeners and just talk about your journey of how you got in the field of being a mental health professional, being a therapist, and all that.
Gotcha. Okay. So yes, I'm Miss CHEVONDA Allen. And I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor here in Texas. And I did not start out wanting to do psychology or mental health. My career path was very different in my 20s. I was in media and communications. I worked at a magazine in Manhattan. And so life was very different. And then I wanted to do grad school, but I wanted to do graphic design. Like that was where I thought my passion was and my talents. And then I was at work one day at the magazine, and I really feel like God was like, I need you to do something else. And I was just kind of like, I don't want to. They don't make any money. Why are we doing that? And but I decided to just follow that prompting. And it ended up being just an amazing experience because when I moved to Texas, there's not really much of a media world. And so lo and behold, counseling became my bread and butter versus just something I thought I was going to do to help on the side. So it's been an interesting journey that I don't necessarily think is all about me and what I want. But, that's life sometimes.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to be here with you guys talking about mental health. I think it's an important topic, and especially in our community. And so I guess we'll jump into more of that.
No, it's so interesting that you took that route because most people, you would think someone, maybe that's something they want to do their whole life, or when they get into college, they major in it, but you just took a different path and then just kind of followed a calling, and you find yourself becoming fulfilled by it and doing it full time and able to support yourself. We were talking about it on the podcast last night. Like if you could find that fulfillment and like support yourself off of it. Like that's
Yeah.
like you hit the jackpot in life. Like that's what we all trying to reach. So I mean,
Yeah.
as far as like say you're talking to somebody who just is completely ignorant of therapy, psychology, all that stuff.
Hmm.
They just don't get it. How would you explain like what you do and what's the process of what you do?
Yeah. So, and I use this, and I use analogies a lot. I use sports and car analogies a lot.
Oh, good.
So,
Okay.
so I try to explain it to people, and a lot of times, guys, I explain it to them like when your car is acting up, and you're not a mechanic yourself, and you want to know what's going on, you don't, you might try to figure it out, but at some point, you're like, all right, this is beyond what I know about cars. Let me go to my mechanic. And with
Mhm.
mental health, with therapy, it's pretty much the same way. We study people, we study relationships, we study the brain and how things work. And so when you're having issues with your emotions, when you're having issues with your brain, because all of that is seated in your brain, which is just another one of your body's organs, when that stuff happens, you take it to the person who studied that and who knows it. And so when you're having issues with relationships, your emotions, your mental health, go into therapy is just like rolling into the mechanic to see what's up with your car. You just something's off, you're not sure what, and you just take it into a professional to check it out and see what's going on. So that's kind of how I explain what therapy can be like.
Uh, that's a great, such a great analogy.
Yeah.
Like especially to men because it's not even like a stereotype, right? Like I think it's proven that men in general kind of are opposed to therapy. Or let me speak from my profession as a social worker. Um, when I'm engaging with my clients, engage with parents, it is usually harder for sure to try to, like, let's say court had ordered a father to do individual therapy and ordered a
Hmm.
mom to do individual therapy. It's a lot more, it's more difficult to get the dad to enroll into individual therapy, usually than it is like the mother in most cases that
Yeah.
I deal with. Um, and that's also true about um, our community as Black people. There's always, not even just Black people. There's all, I've worked with obviously different ethnicities of family, uh, Black community, Latino community. It's just the stigma of older generations of looking down at therapy and saying,
Right.
no one needs it, you know, you know,
Suck it
that's,
up.
yeah,
Suck it
that
up, man.
that type of
Yeah,
mentality.
suck it up. Yeah, keep our problems in the house. Don't go telling our strangers our problems. Yeah.
Right.
So how has is that changing? Like from your experience, how is it how do you engage, those communities, our communities, people of color, into the benefit of doing therapy and actually being in a space where they feel like they can open up?
Yeah. Well, I as much as I have mixed feelings about social media in general, but I do think that social media has helped shed a light on what therapy is, what mental health
Mhm.
is. I think a lot of hesitation is a lack of information,
Yeah.
right? So if you don't really know about it, you haven't been exposed, then all you know is what you hear, and you just don't know anything else. So I think that has a lot to do with why when communities are hesitant, I think a lot of it is just a lack of information, lack of information, lack of access, um, and even just an understanding of how can that even help, right? How can coming and sitting in your office and telling you what my issues are, how can that actually help me? So sometimes social media has helped people start having those conversations. And I think as the stigma gets pulled away,
Hmm.
and we look at it like any other kind of health, nobody looks at you weird if you go to your cardiologist or you go
Right.
to any other doctor or specialist. we just need to pull that same stigma away, because our brain is just like our heart or our lungs. And if it's
Yeah,
not doing what we need it to do, we need to take care of ourselves.
absolutely. And you brought up a good point about social media. I could think of a couple of people, people that I follow on Twitter, who I engage with all the time, real good people, and they always put out there like, shoot, I see a therapist regularly, and they're
Yeah,
like, they're like, hey, anybody, if you feel like you should go to a therapist, and that means something, even if you don't comment on it or whatever, it means something. I know my dude Will, he always puts it out there that therapy changed his life, like it
yeah,
just helped immensely. So I mean, when people see that, and I think you start to see that with millennials, Gen Z, uh, just due to the internet. Like, I mean, just the word anxiety. Me growing up,
right,
I never even heard the word anxiety growing up. Like my
yeah,
parents, I had older parents. Like we didn't talk about anxiety and stuff like that until I
right,
got older and I started, just reading more. And I was like, this anxiety thing, like maybe this is why I'm having this issue here or that issue there. And and as I grew older and just communicate with people and talk to people, there's so many people dealing with high anxiety, and obviously anxiety is the effects of anxiety are different for people, and it's different levels for people. Some people sometimes it's just something tangible in your life that you can handle. Sometimes it's like clinical, and maybe you need some sort of medication for it or something like that. But it's
yeah,
definitely a thing, and I know me personally, I've dealt with it, just in life, just like
hmm,
everybody, and I've had to look up like different ways to kind of self-diagnose and and I don't want to say self-medicate, but deal with it. Not
yeah,
medicate,
yeah,
but like deal with it. Like me personally, when I was really having it bad, like I couldn't sleep or nothing. I just like my mind was racing at night
hmm,
because there's just so many things going on in my life. I just started like writing everything down, just writing all my problems down, making like a priority list for myself, and just like to start attacking each little thing. Start with like the easiest to the most difficult, and it really helped me. And that's just
yeah.
me. Like I don't, that's just what worked for me. But obviously, I'm sure there are things like so many different tools that you have in your toolkit that you suggest to people for like high anxiety situations.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's one that I would suggest. A lot of times it's good just to get it out of your head, and so you can look at it and kind of piece it all together.
Hmm.
Um, the way that this, the United States has treated African Americans over the years,
Hmm.
well, we know it's well documented. Um, but with everything we've seen recently, when Ryan brought up social media, um, all the police brutalities, black men dying by the hands of police, things that we are consistently exposed to um, due to social media and things like that. How does that and seeing things like that affect our mental health as black people living in this country?
Oh, it ratchets up anxiety
Hmm.
tremendously. Not only just anxiety, because anxiety is just it's fear based. So
Hmm.
a lot of the anxieties that we experience is connected to some kind of fear. So then, you have this proliferation of, am I safe to go outside? And some of those
Yeah.
messages that we're seeing. Um, so it creates anxiety and it creates trauma,
Yeah.
and so we're watching these images over and over online, and then, we're following the social upheaval, and then we're following court cases, and just it's a perpetual traumatization for a lot of people, especially if you have a hard time pulling away from the all day, all night access to information we have.
Yes.
It can become overwhelming, and so if you're not paying attention to your mental health, um, it can get difficult, because you can get inundated with that anxiety, um, the sadness of it all sometimes, and
Yeah.
then just the constant re-traumatization when it seems like every week there's somebody else, some other
Yeah.
person that is not getting justice, so to speak. They're getting, justice in the streets. So it's tough. It's tough for the community to watch that and figure out how to deal with it. It's not new, but I think
Yeah.
what's new is, social media,
Right.
having access to so many different images and opinions. And that's new, right?
Oh
What
yeah.
the community is experiencing is not new, but having so much access to it is new, and it can be hard to figure out how to manage all that.
Yeah, it's crazy because I tweet about it all the time. Like pretty much every day, I'm literally witnessing online somebody getting beaten, somebody getting
Hmm.
shot, just all kind of like real violence stuff that you rarely saw. Like I grew up in like a violent neighborhood, and even like in a violent neighborhood, I didn't see it every day.
Right.
It was once in a while, but like I'm exposed to it every day on social media. And I always ask myself, like, what is this doing anything to me? Like, what
Hmm.
effect is this happening on me? People say you get desensitized. I don't think I am desensitized because it actually my senses are enraged. It's like I feel all of
Yeah.
it. It's quite the opposite. Like so, and I always wonder why, like you said, trauma. Like, what effect does
Hmm.
that have on me? And I just try. Sometimes I just got to unplug and just like I don't want to look at nothing. I don't want to look at Facebook, Twitter. I just
Yeah.
want to watch some reality TV show, something stupid, and just turn my mind off because it's just so crazy, and you can get easily caught up in just how crazy the world is when there are really are a lot of positive things going on too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. But it can definitely be tough if we don't, take that time to see what's going on with ourselves and then unplug if you need to.
Yeah,
I think we see it all the time. People are like, yeah, I'm going to take a break, and I'm sure people have different reasons, but you do have to, limit or monitor what all you consume because everything you consume has some kind of effect on you. It's just what. Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
I think that's a great point because one of my next questions, we were talking about all the good things that come with social media, right? But
Mhm.
something that I've, you know, I think all anyone who has niece, nephew, child is that especially for women is that these expectations of societal expectations of like a woman should look like this, and when you have a young girl growing up in 2021 with social media, the kind of Instagram things like that, the instant gratification, the selfies, and how you know if social media can impact someone's self esteem growing up in today's age, it's completely like anything like we like all of us growing up experienced it, when we were kids, right? Um,
Mhm.
how is how how do we work, or how do you, if you work with kids, or how does one work with kids in regards to that, in regards to this instant gratification type of mentality that comes with social media, and if you don't get it, um, that them looking inward in themselves leading to depression and potential having like suicidal ideation, like how do we work with kids like that experience growing up in today's age with social media?
Yeah. So, I think one of the biggest things with kids at social media is, um, from my perspective, it's finding out from them how it's affecting them. So I think it's good to even just ask them, what do you get? What do you think about all this access? And have them really see, that social media is not necessarily a mirror of real life. And really understanding what social media is, I think is really helpful for kids. Because if you just give them access and you don't explain to them what it is, it can be very dangerous. And so I think one of the biggest takeaways is, helping that kid navigate what all social media is. And it is not a full depiction of real life necessarily. It can be very curated and, not a realistic image. But if they're going into it like this is what everybody else is like, and this is real world, and if they're not grounded in themselves, which as a teenager, who was, right?
Yeah.
That the whole goal of being a teenager is to differentiate and figure out who you are and what you're about. And then you have all of this information. It can be overwhelming if that kid is not grounded in something or someone, strong family ties or, things like that. So I think that's the biggest thing with kids is just educating them on what it is so they can use it responsibly, I guess is the best way to put that.
Yeah. And obviously
Help
another
them.
and another thing that with social media is of course relationships, romantic relationships with, girlfriend, boyfriend,
Uh-oh.
Partner, wife,
Uh-oh.
husband.
Yeah.
Look, let's talk about it. Like
Uh-oh.
you get some likes, your girl, your wife sees somebody liking your Instagram, or or you see you looking at things you're probably not supposed to, or
Yeah.
maybe your wife, is really into social media and really getting likes and stuff like that. You get jealous. It just introduces like a whole new set of outside eyes and
Mm.
problems.
Yeah.
Have you seen that a bit in your experience dealing with the public?
Oh, for sure. Social media has taken out a number of relationships, right? I mean, I
Tons of
think,
them.
I think, social media it could be a symptom, but it is not
Yeah.
the root cause of any
Uh-oh.
relationships
Right.
Speak on
issues.
it.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're having issues and social media is in the mix, that, like I said, that's a symptom of other problems. And
Mm.
so that's certainly a time to maybe put a microscope on the relationship and see where the real issues are, because social media is not a problem causer, but it might highlight other issues you got going on for sure.
Mm. Mm.
Might exacerbate already.
Right. Because if we have trust issues, I'm not going to get trust issues because somebody liked your Instagram if we never had trust issues in our relationship, right? That doesn't
Right.
come out of the blue from nowhere,
Exactly.
and that doesn't necessarily mean that someone's been unfaithful. That could just be insecurities on another person's part that they brought in to the
Yeah.
relationship. So, I mean, again, but it's at the end of the day, it's not that like on social media, it's whatever else is going on in those people in that relationship.
So I'm gonna make a kind of along the same. I'm gonna kind of get into like my profession a little
Okay.
bit, a little segue because we talk about problems with relationships. I deal, and also so that you deal with addiction. Obviously, I deal with a lot of that too. But one of the biggest things I deal with is, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, whatever people want to call it these days. Social media, so many cases that start with, the dad, the father, breaking the mom's phone, and that's like the catalyst. But I've been a social worker almost going on 6 years now, so I've had some time in the game, and in these 6 years, the biggest thing that a lot of my clients, and at least initially, and some get it when they get it, it's great, but a lot of clients initially don't get is the risk and the abuse and what the child experiences when that child is in a home that is unsafe, dad beating up mom, or vice versa. But usually it's dad beating up mom, but obviously the opposite can happen as well. And then there's just this like knowledge of like, oh, well, they only heard it, they only saw it, like I didn't put hands on them, not knowing the effects that it has on the child. In the moment and even long term in life. And it's a thing where it's sad. It's beautiful when a parent realizes it and that parents change their ways for good. Like that's a beautiful thing. But they don't understand how scared that child is and how traumatized that child is in that moment, and possibly could be for the future. What are you, in your just experience? What are some things that you have done throughout your career where maybe like that light bulb for a client has gone off, and it's like oh shit, like damn, like I never thought of it like that in that type of way.
Yeah. There's been a number of those. If we're talking specifically about violence, what I can say is there was an opportunity. A lot of times, violence starts with anger management, right? So not being able to really manage my emotions. So not even just anger management, but just emotional intelligence, right? What are all the feelings that I feel, and how do I deal with those? So I think, and I'm going to try not to get on my soapbox
Get on
about
it.
about not, about our culture and our community not being able to just be people for so long. So we're not necessarily taught how to deal with all of the emotions that we have. So then you have a person in a relationship who doesn't know how to deal with their emotions, right? And so everything is getting kind of masked with anger. And then that just escalates over time. So I had it happened to be a guy who was in anger management. And, I think something along the lines of, it only happens a couple of times a year. And I was like, cool. That sounds like it sounds not a lot when you think, well, there's 355, 56 days in a year, or whatever. I'm getting old in my math.
It's okay. We're not math people. Well, me and you are. I don't know about Ryan. No.
Definitely not a math person.
I went to social work specifically not to do math, so we're good on that.
Right. So you have 365 days in a year. So a couple of those days where it's just I'm a little, over the edge with my anger, it's not so bad. And I was like, well, then how long have you guys been married? Oh, I forget what double digit number it was. And I was like, okay, well, multiply those 4 by that number. And then, so now you're telling me there's been 56 instances.
Come on now.
Of this kind of interaction with your partner. Are you comfortable with that? Is then like my next question, right? So a couple of times a year is one way to look at it. But when you look at, okay, this has happened 56 times, right? And so I think a lot of times just when you're in it, it's easy to not really see what's going on because you're in it. But when you step out or you have someone just kind of help you get a different perspective, I didn't necessarily do or say anything that helped him, but just that different perspective made him say, you know what, this is important because now it's not just a couple times a year, it's happened almost 60 times.
Yeah.
So, sometimes, being able to go to counseling and get a different perspective, because sometimes that's all it is. Counselors are not like, here's how you run your life. It's not my job to, tell you what to do, but sometimes it helps to get an outside perspective. And then you can find the motivation to want to make changes for yourself, And so I think, especially in those situations, I think if we could get back to basics, which is just here are all the types of emotions a human being might experience. And if I come across one, what do I do with it, right? If we learn how to do that, I think we'd see a lot of instances of violence in the home go down because people learn how to actually communicate what they're really feeling.
Right. One thing I hear a lot, like just when I'm talking to my buddies or whatever, and say they're talking about, hey, my girl want to go to therapy, my wife want to go to therapy. I'm not doing that shit, And a lot of times,
that too.
Just like that.
Yeah.
I'm not doing. But a lot of times their reasoning is they just feel like they know they're going to get the blame. Like if they go to therapy, it's going to be finger pointing at what he's doing wrong. They're not going to get heard. And at the end of the day, it's just going to be more of the same pretty much, except we out of money. Like we just had to spend money to just get told I'm at fault. And, obviously it's bigger than just, who's to blame. It's much bigger than that. It's about, two people trying to live together every day and try to find that little common communication to live, happy, and so I mean, how do you deal with that? Just dealing with that partner, maybe the man, but sometimes the woman too, that just doesn't want to be a part of the process.
Yeah, and I mean, and it doesn't. I've seen it in both sides of the coin. I think that usually boils down to like some sort of insecurity, right? And you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's fear of me being the fall guy, or the one to blame, and that fear, um, keeping that person from wanting to do something that could potentially help the relationship. And I've seen women do it, and I've seen men. I've seen either side of that happen in some relationships. So it's not just guys that are hesitant sometimes. I think it depends on that person. If they are the kind of person that in general has a hard time being introspective and
Mm,
looking at themselves,
man.
then now you're saying, well, now not only do I struggle looking at myself, now you're going to look at me and some strangers looking at me. But again, they're not, if you're going to a good therapist, they're not looking at either of you. They're looking at the relationship.
Mm,
Because with relationship counseling, the relationship is the client, so to speak, so I'm
mm,
not on anybody's side. It's
Mm.
what's best for this relationship that you guys say is important and you want to have. But I think again, it goes back to lack of information. If people don't know that that's what therapy's like and that's what you're going in there to get, then
mm-hmm.
fear starts to run the show. And instead of, wow, what if this works and this relationship is actually a place that we both want to be every day, the fear gets in the way. Fear of being finger pointed. But it takes two to tango. So the finger's going to get pointed at both of y'all at some point to discuss what's really going on. Because there's usually no one wrong person in any relationship issues. That's highly unusual.
Uh, yeah, that is so well said, and it's that the whole like the relationship as a client is just a great line and a great
It really
way to
is. It really is.
to look at it. But Ryan brought up something that you know sometimes it's used as a crutch,
Hmm.
as opposed to why not to do therapy, counseling, or mental health services, and other times it's legit. Is unless potentially if you do not have good insurance, good benefits, the cost of therapy can be astronomical. Whether it's individual, couples,
Hmm.
whatever it may be. Um, how how is that barrier? I guess is the word I'm looking for. Um, how is that barrier? Is there a way that barrier can come down, slowly over time, that it's affordable and feasible for anyone who wants to get mental health services are able to get them?
Yeah, I mean, that barrier is tough. I think when we stop viewing mental health as a luxury,
Yeah.
and we start really viewing it as a necessity or preventative measures, I think if they looked at it, because there are some things insurance covers preventative, and they will cover it fully because they look at it like this is going to prevent more costly things later.
Yeah.
And I think if we could start to see mental health like that, like if there was funding to have a class in high school where you teach kids how to deal with their emotions and
Yeah.
interpersonal relationships. I mean, if we could funnel money in that direction,
Oh
man,
my God.
that would just change the whole trajectory, I think, as far as what comes later, from mental health to interactions with the police to restored families. There's just so much that could come that's good from teaching emotional intelligence type of things early on. Even just awareness. I mean, I know there are some communities, but largely probably still communities of privilege where they are talking about suicide prevention in high schools and helping peers recognize when their friends and classmates might be having issues. But having that be standard and not just a school district over here that does it or a school district that over here that does it,
Yeah.
and having it be something that we are aware of. So when we talk about it, when we highlight it as this is just what we do versus, oh, just that only applies to some people over there sometimes, then again, like I said, you take the stigma off of it and it just becomes preventative measures on how we do life in general, but I think that barrier is only going to come down when we stop looking at it like not even a privilege, like a luxury versus something that everybody needs. And I do think everybody needs the skills that you can learn, unless somehow you learn them growing up, and that happens, but it's rare. It really is. We have stickers as therapists that say, if you have a family, you're keeping us in business. And we all come from some family, and most of us don't make it out unscathed, where we have nothing going on that stems from, what we experienced growing up. So I think having some I guess checkpoints, and I think high school is just a good time to do that because kids are smart enough and mature enough to store that information, and they're on the cusp of being adults and taking that out into the world. If we could get in there with some tools about how to communicate and what to do with your emotions and what healthy relationships look like, we could make a world of good.
You hit a key point right there with what healthy relationships look like, because I mean, to be honest, we just don't know. I mean, growing up where we grew up, coming from, either poverty or, coming from the hood and stuff like that, we used to seeing couples scream at each other or throwing things at each other. We used to, seeing violence here and there, or violence being a solution to solve conflicts. We're used to, using brute force to get what you want, or scheming and lying and all these things, and we just experienced that. And and as far as emotions, it's like, I mean, especially as a man, as a black man, it's like, no, I mean, emotions you don't cry, you don't show emotion, you got to just suck it up and deal with it. You got to just put your hat on every day and get over it and to handle your business. You can't emotionally react to that.
You're getting close to my soapbox.
Get on it. Get on it.
I'm just saying it's and I've dealt with that just personally, because I'm someone I'm just personally I've dealt with that, just like, because sometimes when I was younger, I would definitely have my little my anger reactions, because I was always the type that would just kind of take it all in, not really react. Everybody like, oh, Ryan, you just so cool, laid back. But really inside, I'm steaming. You know what I'm saying?
Boiling, bro.
Boiling. And then when I react, everybody's looking at me like I'm crazy, because,
right.
Where's all that come from? But because, I didn't communicate how you made me feel at the time. I didn't communicate that I didn't like that interaction. I put myself in situations where that left me, that put me in emotional harm, but I didn't even understand to even look at it like that when I was younger. Whereas now I kind of learned that, and I just kind of, but it's even still today, it's still like a battle that I have to keep on going with. But it's just, like you said, emotional literacy, just understanding yourself, looking at yourself, understanding, what things affect you, how to deal with certain things. It's so, oh my God, it's so important. If they taught kids that, that would be so huge.
Yeah.
So huge.
I think so too. I mean, my soapbox, it's mostly Black men, because I think that Black men certainly get the worst of it, but men in general, they're not allowed to be, they're not raised to be human and feel all their feelings, a lot of times. And like I said, it's worse with Black men, because Black people in general, are, even to this day, there's people struggle to look at us as full human beings, and so having the ability to know yourself as a human and explore all that, if you're coming from an environment where you're trying to survive all the time, who has the bandwidth to then say, well, how am I feeling today? It's not, for some people, that's not a luxury that they get, but it really shouldn't be a luxury. It should, all of us should have that ability to not be in survival mode all day long, and I think that, part of my soapbox is just, Black men not being able to just be human, and that means having it be okay that if you're sad that you cry, or if you miss somebody and you want to say that, and or your mom passed and you actually get to grieve. I mean, how many men can you think like, yeah, I really saw him grieve and do a really good healthy grieving process? I mean, that's just not something that Black men are allowed to do, and it's just a travesty. It really is, and hopefully it gets better. But I think when we start just looking at the reality of it and not just use the buzzwords that people talk about it with now, when we really just kind of get into how that came to be and how do we make it better.
Yeah.
That's so beautifully said. And I always think about like my childhood. Like I grew up, my grandma raised me. My birth mom was largely incarcerated, like a lot of my formative years. And my grandma just allowed me to be like me, right? Like, and she allowed me like expressing feelings are okay, older Black woman. And that's, I'm lucky to be able to, I've always been able to kind of express myself better than most in general. But as I've gotten older, I've realized kind of where that came from, right? Like I didn't really have I had a male, figure in my life, but I didn't have like, that Black strict dad or, figure just saying like, you can't express yourself like this. Like, that's not appropriate.
Right.
Like you got to man up. And, that has led to, why I'm able to, do the things I'm able to now, which is the blessing. One of the last things I wanted to kind of bring up is this pandemic, COVID, how that's changed everything. I guess I have two things before we let you go. The first is like virtual therapy, telehealth. I have seen it, at least in my profession. I've talked to other therapists about it, and it's a lot more convenient, right? Like you can do like a Zoom session. Some therapists just do like a phone session. But the other part of that, that I hear from therapists, and I've kind of witnessed this as a social worker, is that like for our jobs, like sometimes you gotta see the person in person. Like there are so many things that, we lose social worker therapists because we're doing telehealth. Especially, like I'm not even talking about like telehealth with like kids, right? Like that's a
right.
whole
That's
just even adults, right? Like if you're asking a client a question and they answer it, maybe if that client is sitting in front of you, you can see like, a tick or how they react to the question in person, but over telehealth, like you have no clue for the most part, right? Like it can be missed. How has this changed with the pandemic, kind of changed your way of doing therapy?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I'm really grateful for telehealth. I mean, number one, it allowed people to still have access. I cannot even begin to imagine how hard it would have been for a lot of people who all of a sudden lost access to their providers. So that was really like a lifeline for them and for us, as also making a living, and so the technology definitely has afforded us that opportunity to not lose that connection. Now that being said, it's obviously not perfect. I don't typically work with little kids, but even with the younger preteen, early teen age, it's harder to connect with them in general anyway, just because of how teenagers are.
Don't get me
right.
started.
And a lot of times, I mean, sometimes they do want to come in counseling, but a lot of times they're coming begrudgingly anyway.
Yep.
And so it helps to be in person, to have that connection, so that definitely gets lost in that age range for sure. And so it does make it more difficult. But with that being said, I think telehealth had a ton more good than the cons, so to speak. But you do miss out. You miss out on key body language, because you're only seeing that small portion versus that whole person's compartment, how they sat on the couch, all that kind of body language that you miss when they're just at home or in their car. So there is that negative there, but I think overall it really has been a blessing for a lot of people to still be able to stay connected, even though it's not what we're used to, which, and from as far as people now realizing that if they're further out, and they don't have providers in their communities, they're still, so now again, we're talking access, right? So telehealth really has allowed people to have access that they would never have had before.
Yes.
So I think it's been pretty good, but it definitely does have its challenges.
Yeah. The last one I got for you, actually today, since we were going to have this conversation, it just got on my mind about therapy. I've been thinking about doing it for years. Never been to therapy. I always kind of just put it off or just came up with an excuse like, oh, my insurance ain't all that. And my insurance ain't all that. I probably don't get it covered. But today I just say, you know what? Let me get into it. I checked in my insurance. It does cover therapy, behavioral health, and all that stuff. So, I started looking at some doctors that I could probably, or therapists that I could probably go to just to see about therapy. But then it also occurred to me, like, where do you start to find a therapist?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's like, do you just roll a Rolodex and just pick one? Obviously, I'm sure you could ask people, but some people are like, I don't want you going to my therapist. That's my therapist, So it's weird. Yeah. It's weird. Like, how do you even start? Do you what would you suggest? Just pick one, or just kind of roll with the punches?
A little of both, I think. I think a lot of people, especially in our community, word of mouth goes very far.
Yeah.
So if someone is like, I went to her, I went to him, and I trusted them, they were good. A lot of times that is very meaningful to people, for them to know that somebody they trust and knows found someone they trust and know. So I think asking around, again, I think it helps take the stigma away, because then you start to realize, I'm not the only one who's going to therapy. And so it's not just me. So I think when we ask around and when we're willing to share, like, yeah, I have been, or I'm thinking about it, again, I think it helps take that dark cover off of it. The other piece is, do a Google search. That's probably the easiest way. Just Google therapist near me. You'll likely come across sites like Psychology Today, where you're going to see a list. And then another really good way to do it is, especially if you have insurance, the easiest thing to do, especially if you want to make sure it's covered, because a lot of times you'll go online or you hear a referral, you'll find somebody really great, and then you realize they're not in your insurance.
Right.
And so sometimes if you want to use insurance, I would call the number on the back of your insurance card. And oftentimes they will do a search for you, and they'll pull up all the providers in your area. Yep. Some insurance will even call them for you and make sure they're accepting new clients. And so if your insurance company will do that legwork, you're already paying for the service. So you might as well just call and see what they will do for you. And then you can take that list and start your research from there. So at least everybody you're looking at, is covered by your insurance.
That's great information. Great information.
Yeah. That's probably the easiest way.
I have two more. I came up with one. I wanted to ask you, and then I lost my. So I'll have two. I'll make them quick. The first one I'll start with is my second part of the pandemic discussion is how the fuck has all this affected all of our mental health? Like I'm obviously we're still kind of in it, and we're maybe towards the end of it, but I'm pretty sure down the line there's going to, and they've already started to do studies, right? But down the line there's going to be some type of study of the staying at home, isolation, what that's done to us as humans in terms of our mental health. Have you noticed, obviously still working during the pandemic, what have you noticed that the pandemic has done to us, I guess is that's the question.
Yeah. I will say the pandemic, I think, has helped people understand themselves a little bit better. Because there are some people who are living, despite, what's going on around us and the tragedies that we've seen, there are some people who are actually living their best lives in the middle of this pandemic. because they do actually prefer that alone time. They do struggle with the social obligations.
Yeah.
They have realized that they were overstretched and giving too much and being pulled in too many different directions. So I think a lot of those people were able to take a really needed breather during this time and kind of reevaluate what's important. And I think on the flip side, the people who have struggled the most, because they thrive on that social interaction, they thrive on those
Yeah.
personal connections. So I think it's affected different people in a different way, and I think what we can take from it is, learn what you can about yourself, based on what you experienced during the pandemic, and use that to kind of shape how you do the rest of your life. If you were saying yes to every obligation and trying to be everywhere for everybody, and then during the pandemic, you were like, I can breathe again, then maybe now that even though everything is opening up, maybe you start saying no sometimes a little bit more, and you do stay home and you don't worry so much about who's going to think what, because you now know what really works for you, and vice versa. If you really struggle during the pandemic and not being connected, then maybe you start to take stock of those relationships and reach out to your friends a little bit more and be more engaged in the people that you love, because we see when it was taken away, it was so harsh and so harmful, but I think different people had different interactions. I think we all got a little more scared and anxious, right? Because our lives changed at the drop of a dime so quickly, so I think everybody kind of experienced that culture shock of just, our whole lives coming to a halt. But I think as it is played out, some people have thrived and some people have struggled. And I think a lot of that has to do with your personality type.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, for me, like me personally, shoot, man,
Oh boy,
lockdown wasn't no problem. Lockdown wasn't no problem for me. I love the lockdown. I was like, okay, but I will say, just the part that I did really struggle with was just, being away from family, or even when I did, when I did, go and see my family, see my mom and dad and all them. It was you're scared. You're scared because you're like, okay, do I have COVID? Okay, I got the
Right.
mask on, but could I still be infecting them? And my parents were, they're in their late 70s, so I was really just, it was just that constant anxiety of like, oh, I just hope they're gonna be okay, I saw them this past like 2 weeks ago, and it was our first time being together since we're all vaccinated. It was nice to just be calm and just enjoy each other's company and not worried and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed that. But other than that, man, like, shoot, I'm an introvert, man. Like being at home, everybody like shout just fine.
I know, me. So was I, to be honest. I was just like, I don't have to drag myself out, because I mean, I do enjoy being social, but it takes a minute to get out the door. It really does. And if I can talk myself out of going, I will talk myself out of going.
Best friends.
I mean, that's the life of an introvert. You might be really good at extroverting, but it takes effort for sure.
It takes effort. It's like a gas tank just running. And,
yes.
You run out of gas, and it's like, okay, I'm good now. I've been around enough people.
Yes, I need to go home and recover.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. So, but I think a lot of this, if we can kind of don't let any of this that we've learned be in vain.
Yeah.
I think if we can take what we've experienced and pull whatever good we can, I am a firm believer that we can find something good in everything that has happened. And so I think if we can take time to find something good that we learned about ourselves, that we saw differently, and if we can use that going forward, then, then all of this wouldn't have been for absolutely nothing, even if it's just one small change you make based on what you learned about yourself during all this time.
No, that's so well said. Last one I have, for sure, the last one. Being that
last ones, bro.
No. Well, I said that the pandemic question was.
Oh yeah, one of two.
One of two. Okay, I'm not adding more to them. This is something that I think is really relevant. Right? Is you are a Black female therapist, and there are times when I deal with clients, when I, working with clients, and I've heard it before, right? Especially if I'm dealing with let's say like a Black family, which I don't deal with a large amount of because of the area I work in. But if I'm working with the African American family and they're signing up for therapy, like one of the first things they'll tell me is like, why the fuck am I going to therapy and talk to like this 20-year-old white woman, usually studying under someone's license, trying to, trying to get their license. Like they can't relate to me. Like they don't know my life. Like, how can they help me? And that's a very real thing that I hear. So I guess, and I think, and kind of when Ryan brought it up about like picking your therapist, I think that's important. It got me thinking. I want to ask you this even before we did the podcast: is how important is it, for us, for a person who is going to do therapy, get mental health services, that they feel that the person that they're getting those services from they can relate to them as a client, right? And it's such relevant because it is, a barrier for some people when it comes to therapy.
Yeah.
That's a good question, and it's a tough question.
It is.
And I'm kind of going two different ways with that. I mean, so generally speaking, you want to connect with your therapist. You want to feel comfortable. You want it to be someone that you can trust or believe that you can trust and connect to, because it just makes the process smoother and simpler, and you're more willing to open up and be honest.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if you have the ability to, and when I say ability, that also comes down to like access and means, right? So if you have the ability to look around and pick and choose, and you've got the finances to do that, to see whoever you want, or the insurance to have options, then that's good. But if you're in a situation where, you're going to your county to get services, you might not have as many options. You might just have the two people that are employed in that county that offer those services. Those people can still help you. I think, so that's why I'm saying I think it's important, but I don't want to give the impression that if you can't find someone who looks like you or who seems like they have a similar experience, that you can't get good quality healthcare, because you don't. I honestly believe I've helped a lot of people who I have nothing in common with. An example of somebody like that would be maybe, like a 60-year-old privileged white guy who grew up in wealth. Those are all opposite of what my life has been like. But it doesn't mean that person is not still skilled at what they do, and that they can't still help you with where you're struggling, even if you don't get all the cultural and social aspects of what's going on. But again, a good therapist has done cultural training, and they know how to connect, even if it's not their culture,
Right.
And so I think the idea is that even if your therapist is different from you and doesn't have all the similarities that you might like, if you see that therapist making efforts to understand, how do I say that? Help me understand this. And they're not pretending they know all there is to know about your culture, and they're not of your culture. I think that, you can give that person the benefit of the doubt that they're willing to learn, what they can learn from you to help you, but that they still know the mental health, emotion and relationship piece, that they're still skilled at that. So I hope that was a good answer to the question.
No,
It's kind of two sides to the coin.
No, it was a great one. We're not gonna have you go without talking about Small Victories Counseling, your website. For all our listeners, obviously you're in Texas, but tell us about Small Victories Counseling, and your website and everything that you offer.
Yeah, so Small Victories Counseling actually came to me like one night in the middle of the night, and it's about just the importance of recognizing all the little moments that lead to bigger moments in your life. And so it's a big part of the philosophy in my counseling is that we do want to celebrate every small little victory, and so, and let those matter in your life. So that's kind of where that came from and what I'm about. I do, so I'm a licensed therapist. I see adolescents, couples, adults. The only population I really don't see, I guess, would be, maybe 11 and younger. Anybody who's not really suited for talk therapy. I do play games sometimes because I think play is an important part for kids and adults. But I don't do play therapy specifically. So if a kid is a little bit too little for talk therapy, then I refer them to a play therapist. But I do. So I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist mainly. I think, how we think has a big effect on what we do and how we operate. And I can be very solution focused, right? I want you to come in, let's figure out what you've got going on. And I like when people can leave with practical things that they can do to change whatever goal that they had that they want to change. And so right now things are definitely going well with the business, and I'm really excited about that growth. And I'm just really glad that people are taking stock of their mental health. I mean, I'm super busy right now, and that's a blessing. But I think a lot of it is our people are getting out and getting help, and they do. They want to find someone that looks like them, that they can feel comfortable talking about all the stuff that's happening in the world as it relates to race and culture. And so I'm grateful that, that people are, especially in our community, are willing to take care of themselves in this way, because I just think it's so meaningful. You're the only you have. And so if you can put that time, effort, and energy into making yourself as good as you can be and having the best quality of life you can, I think that's the way to go.
Absolutely.
Without question. So listeners, if you're in the Texas area, is it just for people who are located in the area in Texas, or is it, all consuming?
Yeah, no, they would have to be in Texas, either living or that is their primary address. I know a lot of people are kind of moving about the country because a lot of people are working from home. So if you are somewhere else, but you do live in Texas, we could talk. And I'm actually looking to get licensed in California as well. So that'll open up here soon. But yeah, so that's that. So, I'm happy to help. If anybody has questions or they want to talk more or need help finding a resource, they can definitely go to the website. There's a contact us page on smallvictoriescounseling.com, and just shoot me a note and I'll see what I can do.
Awesome. Ms. Allen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for, coming on the show and talking to us about about mental health and everything. And it's so funny, like we're sports fans and we didn't even talk about like mental health and sports and how.
Oh my God.
Right?
That's huge. That's a huge big part of sports. I mean, we see it all. We see it all the time.
Yeah,
like so much stuff watching a game. Yeah.
Like we didn't even talk about that subject, but we might save it for another episode down the line. So we don't want to take up much more of your time. It's late.
No,
there.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure. And I'm sure they did, but I hope our listeners really gained a lot from this episode regarding mental health.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope
Absolutely.
so. I tell people counseling is not just for the extraordinary things that happen in life. It's for the ordinary stuff too. So if you're even remotely thinking about doing it, just do yourself a favor and just check it out and see how it can help you.
Are you on social media?
I am. So I am. Let me see. I know. Don't talk about me. I have to pull it up.
She got to put it up like she got like a brand new phone number. She got to look it up.
I know, right? Don't make fun of me. So I am on Instagram. Instagram is small_victory_counseling. So easy to find on Instagram. And I am also on Twitter, and I think that's what I was looking up because for some reason on Twitter it changed. It's not Small Victories Counseling, so let me see what it is. That's terrible. I probably just need to go ahead and get somebody to help me do all this social media stuff.
You good? You good?
Definitely not my my area of strength. So on Twitter it's SB_counseling.
Okay.
So still of the small victories frame, but it doesn't spell out small victories. But yeah, definitely you can connect with me on social media. I'm definitely trying to do better at engaging, but I do very much so limit my social media consumption for my own mental health.
Understandable. Understandable.
Yes. But thank you guys so much for having me on. I appreciate that you guys are having these kind of conversations. We need more of this. So
We do.
Keep it up. I think it's great.
And shout out to our guy and our listener and our supporter, Ryan Nordruff, who set this up, who provided your information. He's a huge fan of the podcast. I know that he's a clinical social worker in Texas. I'm originally from Texas. I live in California now, but I still consider Texas home, even though I've been gone for 15 years now.
That's how I am with New York.
But he provided me your info and everything, and I'm so glad that he did. So shout out to Ryan for setting this up. We really appreciate it, and thank you for the support, Ryan. With that, we're out.
Peace.
Enjoy all your favorite sports like never before at BetMGM. Sign up using code Hawkeye and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. When you register with BetMGM, you'll get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, and the best daily promotions in the business. And with BetMGM at your fingertips, every play and every game matters more than ever. Remember to use code Hawkeye and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Place your money line, prop, or parlay bets with the king of sportsbooks today. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. Iowa only. New customer offer. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.